Here's Brody Brazil.
Casey, this is the collaboration we've been talking about for a couple weeks. This is the collaboration we need to do a little bit more often, I feel like.
Yeah, we text about it all the time. It's just a matter of when you're available and I'm available, and between the two of us, we don't work together anymore. We used to. We used to always be able to do this together. Now we can't.
But we did actually match for this interview. But this isn't an interview. This is a conversation. But how did you know I was going to go with the tealish motif? How'd you do that?
I don't know. I just think it's a good color for us. So that tends to happen.
All right. It's a big week. It has been a big week for Howard Terminal. Last week was huge to have those initial rulings come out from the Alameda County Superior Court and to go through the process of hearing both sides out. And then this week, we get the official rulings that pretty much everything with those three lawsuits is going away. Minus one thing, which is wind, which we'll discuss in just a second. And there's also the fact that these are all probably going to get challenged, right? There's going to be an appeals to all three of these, I would guess.
Yeah, the official quote that came out from Mike Jacob of East Oakland Stadium Alliance was that they're exploring the appeals, but they will appeal this. They absolutely will appeal this, because why not? If the goal is to slow things down, why wouldn't you appeal?
Thomas and Friends, like the train show.
Oh, I hate that show.
Come on, my son loves it. They always have Sir Topham Hatt is in charge of all the trains, and he hates confusion and delay. I keep hearing that on my son's podcasts. Anyway, I keep going back to everything that the opponents of Howard Terminal want to do here. It's confusion and delay. That's what they want to do to this project. I don't think they know. They don't have the confidence they're going to stop it, but they want to confuse and delay it as much as possible.
Yeah, if Union Pacific Railroad is Sir Topham Hatt, then unfortunately I might have to side with Sir Topham Hatt, because the real beef I have with Thomas, Brody, is that he's like petulant. He's always doing things that he shouldn't be doing. And then he gets his comeuppance at the end of every episode. How about you just do your job, Thomas?
We are way off track here. Okay, so speaking of trains, we're way off track. So these lawsuits, this is a huge deal that these are, for the most part, going away, aside from the wind issue, which we will get to in just a second. I feel like this is big for two reasons. Number one, this was something completely out of the hands of the A's and the city of Oakland. When something goes to court, you don't necessarily know how a judge is going to side or see things. And these lawsuits were specifically against the EIR, which we can also discuss in just a second. Again, there could have been holes in the EIR that we didn't see, that we didn't know about, that somebody else perceived. Turns out, Brad Seligman, the judge, found that there was only the one wind issue. The other part of it is that opponents of the project, and I think they were called petitioners of the project, they kind of lost a lot of leverage here, because in the EIR, it does talk about truck parking at the site. It talks about rail and pedestrian issues. It talks about shipping needs for the current Howard Terminal site. And so basically, there's not much of an argument to be had by the opposition anymore. Can we really just stop for a second and put into magnitude the rulings that just came out? How do you see them?
Yeah, I see them that way too. And I think it's a key distinction. The petitioners said there's all these things that could go wrong. And the judge said, yeah, but they were adequately studied. Just because the judge made the ruling doesn't mean a train's not going to hit somebody at some point. So I guess we should be clear about that. There are dangers and there are things that need to be mitigated. And that is why they want to, separate the trains from the pedestrians. They want to make it so the crossings aren't all at grade, and that's all part of the project. So I think what he was mainly saying is these are adequately studied, and that the EIR was fair. And I think a lot of these things do actually get addressed with the project. So when it gets built, hopefully it gets built, they will have, a bike and pedestrian bridge. They will have a vehicle bridge, and they will make it a whole lot safer than it currently is down there if we're sticking to the trains. But what I liked about it was when you read it, it's almost like every argument has been peeled away at this point. The BCDC vote took away it's going to kill the port argument. The port itself said they want this here, and the BCDC said it is okay. And then you have, the trains and the truck parking and the pollution and all the other things that they brought up to challenge this.
Right.
The EIR addressed all those things, and that means the mitigation plans are good. So,
well, and to now put it into perspective, there's that old sports saying, the ball is in your court or destiny's in your own hands. Now, granted, there's a lot to be sorted out, I think, with the city of Oakland and the A's in terms of this development agreement. When will we actually see it? Again, more on that later. But in a way, I mean, now that this has been resolved, and there are some other things working with the State Lands Commission, and the BCDC is going to have one more permit that they'll need to award to this project. So we're not done with government stuff by any means, but in terms of leverage and control of the situation, like, doesn't this now fall so much more squarely on the A's in Oakland than anybody else now, with the lawsuits essentially moving on?
Yeah, I see it that way too. A lot of the major things that could have gone wrong. I mean, one of the last times we did a conversation like this, it was the BCDC, and I was saying how worried I was about the BCDC vote.
Because you don't know, right? You don't know how they were going to side, right? Totally agree.
Exactly. And so that was the big unknown at the time, and they passed it. Then came the lawsuits. They passed that. So now you got to get to that one huge binding vote on the development agreement and the community benefits agreement. And I think once they get past that, everything else seems a lot more procedural.
Right.
When we talked about this before, I didn't really talk a lot about the lawsuits because it was a variable that we couldn't control or even really properly understand, not being lawyers. Who knows how a judge is going to perceive this?
Right.
I read the tentative ruling and the final ruling, and they may as not have, they might as well have been in a different language. They're very hard to read. I read the EIR too. A lot of that stuff is very hard to read and understand. So to see how very skilled lawyers and accomplished judges are going to process that was hard. So I almost took the legal challenges out and really focused on, does the project make sense? Is it good for the port? Can it pencil out? Would it be good for Oakland? Those are the only things I really look at. And it seems to check all the boxes.
So now it's up to the A's and to Oakland to first come to a development agreement and then have that analyzed, right? We're at this weird calendar situation of September 20th is their next meeting. They were off for 5+ weeks, I think, most of July and end of July, take it back, and most of August. Here we are in September. And so their next meeting on the 20th, they wanted to have things in place so that they could analyze it and then potentially schedule out a binding vote, right? And we just have not had the development agreement. And there's been tight lips on both sides. I mean, I think you and I can sit here and list the names of people we've talked to and ask questions to. Do you feel like you have an answer that satisfies and tells you for sure that there's going to be something soon? Because I don't know that I've talked to anybody that can assure me that.
No, I don't either. I have nothing on that. And
we've tried.
And that's a big fear. Yes, believe me, I'm bothering people constantly. That is my main concern.
Right.
And I think we're going to do a separate video. We can get into that more, but I'm not hearing anything.
Yeah.
And that could be taken in a positive way, and it could be taken in a negative way.
Yeah.
If we had September 20th circled on the calendar, which I did, and I know a lot of people did, I'm not sure September 20th is going to bring what we wanted it to bring. I don't know that they're going to have anything to even look at by September 20th. And there's no indication that they will.
Right.
And then you start worrying about what that means for the calendar and how late they can push it.
And we talk about the calendar because in my mind, the biggest obstacle of time is the turnover of some city council members and obviously the mayor of Oakland. We're going to have a new mayor of the city. I would imagine that most people getting elected and installed are probably going to be favorable of the project. I realize there are some candidates out there who may not feel so fondly about it. But the biggest challenge, though, is that anybody who comes in, whether they are favoring the project or not, is probably not up to speed. You know what I'm saying? So even if you have somebody who comes in and says, well, I support this, but I just don't know much about it because I have not been in the loop of negotiations and they're new to the party, whoever you bring in. So I feel like, I mean, it is a bad scenario, but it's bad in a sense of it's just going to delay things. And that alone might also pose a problem to the whole process and Major League Baseball's involvement and their pressure and whatever happens in Las Vegas in the meantime. I see that as being an issue right now, that the turnover in the election cycle is the big pressing time factor here.
Yeah. For a long time, I thought if this doesn't get voted on before the end of the year, it might be dead. I'm not sure I feel that way anymore, to be honest. I'm not trying to move the goalposts, but I'm not sure I feel that way. I think it's not great. I think it would be bad. but I'm not sure it's the end.
It's not. It's not impossible, but it's definitely not optimal, right?
Yeah, because I think what you're seeing now is, you know, front runner type candidates that are doing fairly well. Shang Tao, Lauren Taylor, Trevor Reed. I'm actually talking to her on Tuesday. I think they're reasonable. I think they're reasonable people, and that's the key. If the terms are good, you're gonna be for it. If the terms are bad, you're not.
Right.
So a lot of it comes down to the terms, which we don't know at this point. But everything else is worked out. So it's kind of like the onus, like you said, is on them. If they can figure it out, this thing's a wrap. And I think they might be, I don't want to say days, but they should be weeks, if not months away from figuring out those terms. But there is one big black hole. We'll talk about it in the next video.
All right.
We're doing a video here.
We're
going to do a video on my channel.
We should explain that. We failed to talk about that from the start of this. So this is one video. This is for the Brazil channel. And then we're going to have a whole separate conversation for the Casey Pratt channel. And it's going to have different stuff, right? We're doing this on purpose because we want to synergize here. This is a true collab. You know what? You're 40, right? You just turned 40?
Yes, yeah, I did. Thank you for pointing that out.
Here's two 40-year-olds collabing. I mean, I'm 41, but you know, never thought that would happen.
No, we're good at that, and you have a lot more subscribers than me. Well, you've been doing this for a lot longer, so we're tricking people into coming to my page.
You've been doing a better job covering this than I have, quite honestly. And
I just do it on Twitter for free, unfortunately.
let's get into that for a second. Do you feel like people have lost patience and lost interest in this project? Only because it's gone on for so long. I feel like there's a bit of complacency actually sometimes. And I hear people who would support this, who favor it, but they go right back to, well, this isn't any farther along than Cisco Field was. I remember when they were going to move to San Jose also. Like an EIR approved, lawsuits being resolved, binding votes right around the corner. I want to give them the PSA, like, you're in the playoffs. I'll share my analogy with you in just a second. You tell me if you agree, but in terms of the sentiment right now, it's kind of a weird one sometimes if people are not in the loop.
Yeah, and I even think back like when Chase Center was getting built. You know, they had people, that was called the Mission Bay Alliance, oddly enough.
That was a huge opposition,
and they sued the EIR, and the hospital wasn't for it. You know, the nurses weren't for it. They thought there were going to be a lot of problems with how they got people in and out of the hospital in case of emergency. And this is the kind of stuff that happens, but I feel like with Chase Center, I didn't follow it as closely. And so with this, having gone on for decades now, like, this is when things are happening. I honestly, I don't know that I ever thought we'd see an actual EIR certified on any A stadium.
Right. Let alone a really good one that's been kind of, I would say bulletproof, but it's kind of been invincible so far. Like, it just got challenged by 3 lawsuits and it won almost every. We forgot to talk about wind, by the way, but it won pretty much everything.
Yeah, and it passed the BCDC. I mean, everything that you needed to have happen has happened.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's the thing that if you follow this thing for decades, it's easy to get checked out and not be interested because it's just dragged on for so long. But that's the point I keep making to people is like, this right now is the time. And a lot of the reason I'm even doing this and started doing it is because of that complacency. I noticed it and I saw it and I felt like it was either going to happen or they were going to slink off in darkness and no one was going to care or pay any attention and no one would be held accountable. And I was like, nope, everyone needs to be held accountable.
Here's my analogy. And you tell me if this is accurate in your viewpoint. The whole leading up to this process, the EIR getting certified, the state bills being passed to make the lawsuits go quicker, to expedite, the 270 days that they had to be resolved. There was so much legwork that went into this process, and that happened in 2018 and 2019. That was like qualifying for the playoffs, okay? So then the A's are in the playoffs with the stadium situation. The ALDS was the June 30th BCDC vote, right? Because that's a do or die elimination situation. If the BCDC says no thank you, project is done, right? That was an elimination round. We got past that. Now we're in the ALCS. The ALCS basically consists of getting an agreement with Oakland and getting a binding vote from Oakland. Once you pass that, then you get into the World Series, which obviously, ultimate prize. That's Alameda County joining in on the IFD with their own binding vote. That's the State Lands Commission. That's the BCDC's ultimate permit. And And that's also, I had the lawsuits getting resolved actually as the World Series, but we're kind of almost, I mean, again, minus wind and minus some of the appeals, we're getting a lot done there. I feel like right now, if people say, where are we at in this process? A 2-0 series lead in the ALCS. And I'm also saying that the ALCS is going to be tougher than the actual World Series opponent. Does that make sense? Am I close there?
So, I mean, I might have started the playoffs or at least clinching the postseason with the Planning Commission vote. Maybe certifying the EIR was your wild card round.
Okay.
Since the A's always end up in the wild card. But
that's a really sore subject.
But here's the thing, and the point you just made in all of this is each round gets harder, right?
Right.
And so they've passed the Planning Commission, they certified the EIR, they passed the BCDC, the lawsuits are going well, but each step is far more complicated than the next. And so I think the biggest thing they have to do is when they get that DA and CBA voted on, that to me is I don't want to say it's the World Series, but that is the last thing that they have to do. If they get that done, I think it's adios Las Vegas at that point. You have this thing, and then it's just procedural going forward.
But that's the thing, right? Sometimes in sports, the NFC Championship game is way harder in reverse than the Super Bowl was. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes the ALCS is the difficult opponent, and then you get to the World Series and you win it 4-1. It's I don't know.
If the Niners beat the Rams in the NFC Championship game, they easily would have beat the Bengals and won the Super Bowl.
There you go.
That's the analogy.
The hardest part of this whole process is where we're at right now. And it's also the most nerve-wracking because, again, I'll go back to the conversations I have with people, the conversations many more that you have with people. I don't know that we're getting answers. We're getting positive signs. The mayor, Dave Cavil, both presenting that, hey, things are on track, things are going well. Lauren Taylor told me every time he hears an update, it's generally good. But I mean, nobody can really answer the question of how close are we, and will this actually happen here in the fall to take a vote by the end of 2022? So I think that's just kind of putting it full circle. It's unknown when the rest of these ALCS games are going to get played. Yeah.
I think that's a fair point. And that's the tricky part. When I talked to Sheng Tao, the thing she said was, if 9/20 doesn't happen, they could always push it back to October.
Yeah.
But the key is, and this is a huge one, they can't just say, here are the terms, vote.
Right. They need analysis.
It's got to be, here are the terms. Now we need at least a month to study the terms and go over them with our constituents and make sure everybody understands the terms.
Right.
Then we can vote. So it's not like they can get these terms on 9/20 or October and say, go.
Right.
Get it done before the end of the year. Not going to happen. So we're really going to need these things soon.
One other thing that's not going to happen is the public vote. Now, that was, a handful of weeks ago. That was decided by the city council. It was a weird thing to go through, as a responsible citizen. And neither you nor I live in Oakland, but again, Bay Area residents, Alameda County people growing up. I mean, it's definitely part of our, our fabric. But it's weird when you would say, well, we don't really want the public to make this ultimate decision. But number one, looking back at the precise time, there's not a decision to be made because there was no offer or no deal to decide on even. There's no terms to vote on for the public. And the second thing is, again, the lack of updated information, I would say, for most of the general public is very low. And actually, going back to the fact that these lawsuits are kind of dying down, potentially going away for good, this kind of closes the door a little bit for that whole chapter of misinformation about the project.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of things we've heard and haven't heard about the project. And I think as each layer of this onion gets peeled back, you're noticing how they kind of fall off and go away.
Yeah.
Like the argument against how it's going to hurt the port went away with the BCDC. They had a lot of noise and a lot of mailers and a lot of misinformation pumping in ahead of the potential thing to put it on the ballot. And then as soon as they voted that down,
gone.
Where'd it go?
Yep.
Gone.
Yep.
No one got a mailer again.
Yeah.
And I think with a lot of the train and truck and other issues that have been argued, now when you see the final ruling on the EIR lawsuits, that's going to go away too.
Yeah. It just feels less noisy. You know what I'm saying? The whole deal feels less noisy.
Sheldon noisy, yes. He pitches well, very well.
How about this transition? Let's go from noise to wind. We got to circle back to that real quick. Just a couple more things.
Let's end on wind, and then let's kick off a whole new video.
That sounds good. By the way, to explain it once again, this video is going up. We've got a whole second video and a totally different conversation going up on Casey's channel. So if you subscribe here on my channel, make sure you go find Casey as well. Wind was cited as the one thing that Judge Brad Seligman did not see was adequately mitigated or analyzed in the EIR. And they're not talking that the Howard Terminal site is going to create wind. It's how does the site deal with wind? And they don't want to create a wind tunnel. They don't want to create dangerous situations. He basically said there's no performance standard set, right? So that seems easy to resolve, and they are going to have that resolution, I hope, here by the end of September. Well, you know, I think an answer is like this. The project cannot create winds all on itself that you know, peak out at 25 miles an hour for a maximum of 6 straight hours. Like, if they say that and then they can design it around that, this should not be a problem. It's kind of almost laughable as the last thing that remains.
I think if you went through the entire challenge by the petitioners, I think this is the one thing that was probably the easiest one to remedy. Because let's look at it like this. You're building a baseball stadium, right? You can't play baseball in a stadium with crazy wind challenges, right?
We don't want Candlestick Park 2 again.
It's going to ruin the baseball games. It's going to ruin the fan experience. So if you're telling me that they're not going to adequately study the wind impacts of that site before they build that stadium, to me, that's crazy. Now, the reason they couldn't provide the information they wanted to provide is because they don't have all the building designs finalized. So they don't know exactly how high and how wide and where each building, I mean, they have a pretty good idea, but some of that stuff could change. And so they are going to have to come up with a solution. And I would think the solution would be, when they have that finalized, to have said certain wind expert really go through it and make the adjustments. That's something that the petitioners don't want to hear. They don't want to hear promises down the line that may or may not be met. And in fairness to them, that's a big problem. So I think what'll happen is before 9/20, I mean, we're 11 days away. They have to have something by 9/20. Each side is going to come up with basically an offer. Then on the 20th, they're going to meet and go over those offers. And I just don't see the other side of the equation here, the opposition, accepting any offers, no matter how good the proposal is. So maybe that's when the judge steps in and goes, okay, I think this is fair based on what you're both saying when study's done.
I just have confidence that with all the new venues and things that have been built in the Bay Area, they've mitigated wind before. It just, all the judge was saying is there's no specific tolerance set. All you got to do is set a tolerance, and then you can design. You can design around it so that the site will not exceed that tolerance. So, yeah, that conversation blows.
I'll end on this one point. I'll sidestep that.
All right.
To me, I think that when you have a group represented, you know, by Schnitzer Steel, for example, who is known to have an adverse effect on the environment around that site, to say that, A, you're challenging an environmental ruling is kind of funny, and B, to say that, wow, it'd be really bad if the wind started blowing all of our own toxins all over the place. I just think that's going to be a hard argument to make. So we'll see. I don't know what they're going to do.
It's more serious. I mean, we're kind of taking it lightly, right? The wind and how to fix that. But you're right. It could be very important, and maybe that's why the judge has chosen this to pursue. Of all the other things, the Coliseum option, rail and pedestrian issues, shipping, transportation, all that stuff, and this is what of all those, like, literally 10, 15 different things, the judge has found this to let it proceed on. But again, I don't see it going much farther than a couple handshakes, meetings, conversations, and how can they really get past it? I don't see it. So
it should be a breeze, Brody.
Yeah, I like your play on words better. I might have to bleep mine, actually. It's a family channel. Casey, thank you for doing this, and thank you for doing the other video, which we're about to record, and you're also
go there now.
About to publish. So if you've watched this thing start to finish, thank you for being on my channel. Go to Casey's channel and watch our other video.